Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rebecca Berger. This is Justice for All, where you get to hear from legal professionals in the surrounding area. We have a really great guest with us tonight, Ted Baker from the law offices of Theodore Baker. Ted, welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca, for having me. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining me.
I'm glad to be here. I finally got out of the house.
It was just kind of funny because that's what everybody keeps saying.
I put on a suit, tied a tie today, and it was a refreshing change. So thanks for having me.
Well, and you're in court a lot, so are you actually in court or are you Zoom?
Mostly Zoom.
Okay.
I can say that since the shutdown in March, I have been in Zoom courts, I'm going to say on average 7 to 10 times a week. But I have been involved in an in-person trial in Gloucester County. We've gone through 3 days. There's a fourth scheduled coming up in about a month. We're the only show in town when we're there.
Wow.
So a little unusual. We're spaced out much differently. The look of the courtroom is different than what we would normally be used to, just because everybody is so very far apart and no one else is in the courthouse, so it's a little odd. But so frankly, it was good to be there.
So literally, you're the only person in the courthouse, other than a couple of sheriff's officers, I'm assuming.
That's correct. There's the folks at the front door, somebody guarding the judge, and the litigants and lawyers in this case, and that's it.
Wow, that's so crazy. I can't imagine like that scenario, because we're so used to, as you know, attorneys being in court where you're able to, you know, see all of your fellow attorneys, and I think it's just it's a very weird environment for most attorneys right now.
Very, very different. And I miss seeing people, and because that's the time, as you say, you get to kind of catch up, hear what's going on, learn things about the law, what's going on in people's lives, and there hasn't been that kind of contact. So at least being in the room felt like something. That was a step, but I guess hopefully we'll be there soon where everybody else will be joining us.
So did you always want to be an attorney?
More or less. I mean, I can say when I was a young child, I wanted to drive a backhoe. I mean, that's really what I wanted to do. But
like most 6-year-old little boys?
Right, exactly. So I did that. For me, that stuck probably until I was about in 7th grade. And there was a very specific thing that happened that made me decide to be a lawyer. And it may sound odd for a 7th grader, but that was the summer of the IranContra hearings.
Oh, okay.
And if you're a certain age, you may remember that in Oliver North. And there was a lawyer that represented him named Brendan Sullivan, and I was just captivated by him. He was the guy who said in the course of things, "I'm not a potted plant, I'm the lawyer here." And I looked at him and thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be him, as he was there with his client, you know, across the dais from senators and representatives in the thick of battle. So as a 7th grader, that made me want to do it. And of course, later on, like many, you sit and read To Kill a Mockingbird, and you know, to me, I wanted to also be Atticus Finch, which is sort of the other side of that coin of someone who was doing what was right and empathetic.
Did you have any attorneys in your family or anybody who was in the legal field?
Not really. For a
7th grader to be interested in the IranContra hearings, which is kind of very interesting.
Okay. Well, let's say I wasn't exactly a star athlete, so I had to do something else. So I was into the news as a young child, and my mother happened to have the hearings on, and I just got into them, and that's basically what I did for the entire summer. At the end of the summer, I actually went. My family happened to be in D.C., and I showed up. So it was a very formative experience.
Did you ever get to see anything?
Caspar Weinberger.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw him testify. I mean, for a half an hour. We were there, and we were shuttled out, and another group came in. But that whole experience, even though I was young, you know, and really didn't know all about really what I wanted to do, it was the impetus for going further and being interested in other things.
So after going to law school, what did you do immediately after?
I went into a clerkship with Judge Joe Nardi in Camden, who I had met in college. We both had gone to St. Joseph's University, and I had met him through there. And while I was in college, he actually told me, you know, give me a call when you're done law school and you can be my law clerk. So I had my job, you know, in college from out of law school. And he did family cases at the time, and mainly cases involving DIFUS, what is now known as DCPP. So that was now what I practice. But
And I think that people with that acronym, so we had the division known as DYFS before, Division of Youth and Family Services, and now it's become the Division of Child Protection and Permanency.
Yes, and I still call it DYFS.
Yeah, I think everybody does.
It does, because with the Y in there, there's a vowel sound, so you can say it. So, you know, for purposes of us today, I'll probably say DYFS the whole time, but I know it's DCPP, I swear.
But it's funny that most people say that, though, when they're talking about it, even, you know, okay, well, DYFS came out. It's changed how many years ago now? It's
maybe 15. It was a rebranding of sorts after a fairly infamous case out of Collingswood that led to a massive federal lawsuit and a retooling of the entire agency with all kinds of different regulations that were changed. And as part of that, they decided to change the name.
Now, were you practicing in the area of family law at that point and also representing DCPP clients?
Well, what happened, out of the clerkship, I practiced sort of standard family law for a while and found that that really wasn't for me. I know you do a lot of family law, and you need a certain element to be able to do that well. And whatever that certain element was, I came to know rather quickly that I didn't have it. So after stumbling around a bit, I landed in the Attorney General's office representing DYFS. And my first case was the back end of that infamous case from Collingswood. I wasn't the first chair on that, but I was part of the team that was doing that. And then eventually got into more of a standard job of what a Deputy Attorney General or a DAG would do, which was representing the division and essentially prosecuting those cases. And my area of the state was Camden County, and specifically Camden City.
Well, and I don't think that everybody recognizes how that actually works as a DAG representing DCPP or DYFS, as you
It's not
say.
easy. Yeah, it is not an easy task. You represent the agency as a whole, but it's very top down on one end and policy-wise, but bottom up from the reality of how the cases are dealt with. So there's caseworkers and supervisors and other folks up a food chain within a particular office, and you get your hands dirty representing the division, because you're in there assisting those folks making decisions as to what they're going to do with the children that they become involved in. And some of them were very, very horrific kind of cases that I was involved in as a DAG.
There's some that are memorable to you, or?
Yes, I'd say 3 overall have stuck in my mind. You know, I'm not allowed to talk about them specifically because of confidentiality, but I can say that if there was a common thread, it was that the children involved all suffered very, very horrible injuries, you know, at the hands of people who were clearly evil. And it was just so shocking to see that. And it's something that has stuck with me to this day, and I can't imagine I'll ever forget those cases. And they have, in some way, formed the basis of how I think about things going forward.
How have they changed the way you think about that?
One, I recognize that, at least from a DAG point of view, as I was going on, I was looking around every corner because some of the harm that was befalling some of these children at the time were not readily apparent. So a lot of the harm that befalls children can happen in plain sight. So as a DAG on that side of things, I was very aware of that. Now that I have switched into private practice and in large measure I'm offering counsel to families involved in these cases kind of from the other side, I'm aware that the division is kind of looking for those type things, and I just have my antenna up as to what may be happening within inside of a family. Luckily, I've not encountered anything that horrific from the private side, but I'm aware that folks from the division are looking for that kind of thing, and they are by and large, risk adverse, meaning that they don't want to maybe put a child back into someone's home ahead of time, or too soon, for fear that something may happen, because they have too experienced these horrific things. So it's something that clouds the judgment sometimes, or at least from my point of view, of the division side. So I try to battle against that. But it's, again, it's something that sticks with you.
So, I mean, I can't imagine that must not be difficult, like a difficult point of view when you're going into these cases and dealing with, so from the side of the DAG, you're dealing with caseworkers and also maybe guardians for these children, correct?
Yes, and the courts. I mean, because, and on top of that, there's defense attorneys who are representing, the families. There's another lawyer called the law guardian that represents the children themselves, and there is the judge. And everybody has their own various role.
Is it hard sometimes to get on the same page?
Yes, particularly now. I would say that when I started, it was easier, I found, to get on the same page. I think there have been lines that have been drawn over the course of time. And I'm not certain how that started. I think there is more of a separation in the practice of law between lawyers and judges than there was when I started. That I think it does not allow for some frank conversation off the record.
Yes.
So not necessarily backroom deal kind of talk, but just some honest talk, getting to know you. So when the time comes to make a hard decision, say from a judge point of view, the judge knows the lawyer knows the judge. That has definitely changed. But there's other ways to get the job done now. Whereas before everybody might, go out and hang out together after court. That doesn't tend to happen as much, it seems, but there's other ways to get to people now, and to get to know folks, because I think a lot of the practice of law is knowing your colleagues.
Well, and I think particularly in a situation like that, because what you're doing is not only the law piece, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but also I feel like there's a whole social work aspect to it
Very
as well.
much.
With DCPP cases, it's not just legal. There's a social work aspect of it. Maybe people need services. There may be family counseling or, drug and alcohol counseling. What is your experience with that? Well,
you're absolutely right. And that aspect of it is as important as the law part of it. And I'll speak to this from the defense side, that I have to defend my client against whatever accusations are coming through. And let's say, as an example, that the accusations involve substance abuse. If I sit and have an honest conversation with my client, I may discover that, the client actually does have a substance abuse issue. So it becomes an issue not only of dealing with the law, but also making sure that the client is given the help that they need to fix this problem. Because the case, the division involvement, is not going to end until we fix this underlying problem. A court's not going to let it go away. So addressing, in this instance, my example, the substance abuse issue becomes paramount. And that extends to other areas too, different therapy. I've dealt with homeless type issues as well.
I mean, that's got to be difficult, because how are they supposed to care for young children if they're homeless? It is
a massive challenge. And there's sort of an adage in law that poverty is not child abuse. But at the same time, there are realities to a situation that we have to deal with. And whether it's issues with home, if it's issues with substance abuse, if it's mental health, if it's domestic violence with a spouse or a partner, all of these things come into play. And every case is very, very different. And I'm sure you experienced that in your practice.
Yes.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution to any of this.
Well, you always hear this story. Well, I know somebody who had a DYFS involved in one case, and it just went like this, and you're just looking at them like, that's not the case.
Yeah, that worked for them, and that worked for them in that courtroom with that worker, with that DAG, and we're down the hall, and we're with another set of people with a different set of circumstances, and the solution may be completely different.
And I want to talk to you a little bit more about what kind of law is really kind of what DCPP is focused on right after we come back from the commercial break.
Sounds good.
This is Justice for All. I'm Rebecca Berger. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Hey everybody, my name is Ashley Owens. I am your personal networking concierge, and I host a show on RVN TV called Connect to Success, where I interview power networkers in the greater Philadelphia and South Jersey area. So join me every week, 12:30 on Thursdays during your lunch break, and now on Fridays at 9 and 9:30 p.m. We'll see you next week.
This plus this equals this plus this and this. Don't drink and drive.
What makes a temple owl? Meet Stella. She's wise, fierce, and she's not alone. Temple University, where owls call home. We are the cherry and white. The city is our classroom, and we lead the rush hour, making our mark on every field around the world. A world without Temple, well, that's like the sky without the North Star. Temple. Never.
So, I got this new family, and I don't know what it is about this one, but she can't seem to put down that toy all day long. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, and she even talks to it.
Berger. This is Justice for All, where you get to hear from legal professionals in the surrounding area. We're talking to Ted Baker. Ted, before we went to commercial break, we were talking about the law that usually is surrounding DYFS cases. And now I'm using DYFS as well.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So usually your DYFS cases can come under either Title 30 and Title 9.
That's right.
What are the differences?
So Title 9, well, most often the complaints that are filed are indeed filed under both titles at the same time. Title 9 deals with abuse and neglect. So it is the allegation that a parent in some way abused or neglected a child, and that can be in any number of different ways. Title 30 is sort of the kinder, gentler statute that is dealt with in these cases, and that's colloquially known as a family in need of services.
Okay.
So they make these allegations at the same time, but essentially it's saying something's going on in this home with this family, and they need some help. And often down the road, there's ways to resolve these cases with the Title 9 part going away, and the Title 30 part staying. So the onus in litigation of child abuse is gone, and the focus is more on the services. Now that's different, something you didn't mention, that administratively the division has their own findings that they can make and conclusions about what happened and what may not have happened. And they can, for instance, substantiate allegations. And that's something that is outside of court that stays within DYFS. But for instance, a substantiation means that someone can find their name on a child abuse registry in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
And
how can that affect them?
It is something that is confidential. So, you could not go and look, on this list. If you were going to hire me as your associate, you're not going to find you're not going to find me on the list. I can guarantee you that. But
well, that's good to know, Ted. I appreciate knowing
but
that.
You wouldn't even be allowed to look. But some places like a school, they're allowed to look. Agencies say, like a baseball team, Little League, anywhere where adults are going to have contact with children, nurses, doctors, those agencies have the ability to check this list. And if a name is on it, whoever it is will take that information and do what they will, but they will know that for some reason that individual was substantiated for child abuse. And once you're on that list, you cannot get off. As the law is written now, it is non-expungible.
So technically there are 3 levels, correct?
There's now 4.
4.
Well, there's
Okay.
3. There's 3 that are contemplated of degrees of what you don't want, and an unfounded, which is nothing happened.
So we have unfounded, is it not established?
Yeah, there's this. Yeah, not established, established, and then substantiated.
Okay. And
There's
so what happens if there's evidence that comes forward to show the substantiation was incorrect? Are
There-
you able to come off of that list so
There are-
that it's not affecting you in the future?
Yes. Now, this is different than the Superior Court action that we were talking with the Title IX and Title 30, but it is possible to appeal an administrative finding of the division. You find yourself in administrative court. And there's a whole process there that can result in a trial where the division has to defend its finding.
Which is kind of interesting because I think everybody assumes when the division, DIFUS, DCPP, whatever, gets involved, that an attorney's involved all of a sudden, that automatically an attorney's involved. I don't think that people necessarily always realize that it could just be the parties and the DCPP's going through this process, their own administrative process, and never filing a complaint under Title IX in court.
That's correct. In fact, I would say the majority of cases fit that exact situation that you say, that the division does not bring a case to Superior Court. They do their investigation. They may even offer services to families, but there isn't a court case. A lot of people wouldn't even think to get a lawyer because they're just kind of going through the motions and they're not going to a courthouse, so they may not think, maybe I need some counsel here. But the result of what happens in that interaction is a substantiation, which once that's there, there's a limited time to appeal. And then a client or person involved with DCPP, unfortunately, may be stuck with that.
Which then
forever.
They may need to get an attorney to do that appeal process.
Yes.
Depending upon what it is.
Exactly, and there is a limited time to do that. There's ways to try to get more time, but you would need to ask. That's a separate process.
Yeah, because that's the Office of Administrative Courts that's handling that portion. Superior Court is where you're dealing with Title IX cases, correct?
Yeah, and in your example, the Title IX wasn't even filed, so you're not even walking through that courthouse, the Superior Courthouse door at all.
So have you had situations where, let's say they went through their administrative process and they were substantiated and they never offered services to the family, they just had a finding and there was no services?
Yes, I've had any number of cases that way, and they'll get a letter in the mail. That's one of the requirements. If anybody has an allegation of abuse lodged against them, and there is an investigation, there is a letter that they're supposed to get. Doesn't always happen, but they're supposed to get it, announcing the finding. And then it will say, if it's a substantiation, that you have a particular period of time in which to appeal. And if not, then that's it. And that is pretty serious. And that you get that letter and it says substantiated, your next call should be to counsel to find out what to do.
So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions in doing this area of law?
I think it is basically about what we've already been talking about. The need to get good counsel up front on a case.
To help navigate.
Exactly. Because anymore, particularly now, in our time with limited access to courts and how things have changed, particularly over the last 6 months, that there isn't a march to the courthouse necessarily like there would have been before, just in the realities of things. So there may not be the impetus for somebody to make that call. But during that period of time, pre-court, even if it ends up in court, assuming that much, all these things are happening, like you're saying. Services are maybe put in place, interviews are being done, and essentially evidence is being gathered, and things are happening that may not otherwise need to happen. So a lawyer can help navigate that. And one of the important things, I think, that people need to know about is something called a safety protection plan. And they may have cropped up in some of your cases as well, that the division is often called into a case. They will be there and present what is called a safety protection plan to a parent. And the plan will often lay out various restrictions which can involve supervision with their own children, maybe even having to leave the home.
Wow.
So they can't be with their children at all. It may involve the participation in various services, be it, say, substance abuse treatment or therapy of some sort, any number of different things. And I've had any number of clients that just blindly sign it because they think they have to, and they don't. It is a voluntary document.
So they just assume because, you know, the agency handed it to them, I have to sign this.
And it is often presented in a manner that gives them no choice. And in fact, they do.
And could that affect them later on down the road?
Yes. First of all, once they sign it, technically they can back out their consent. However, once things start, again, that evidence is being collected, things are happening in the life of the case that otherwise would not have happened. And it's also hard to make arguments for, say, therapy to stop once it already started. Yes. And maybe it wasn't appropriate in the first place. There are ways that lawyers who are involved in this area of the law, even though there's no court, can deal with this. There's ways that if I'm involved in such a case, I could call the DAG that would be assigned to this case just because of, you know, where it is geographically and the nature of things, and essentially negotiate with them what's going to happen. You know, what is appropriate in this particular case, what may not be appropriate, what could we agree to do, and what may we have to disagree. And in some senses, it's a game of chicken because the division has the option of not pressing it and saying, no, we don't need that particular service, or saying, no, we do need that service, and to get that service, we're going to take you to court, have a judge compel you to do it. So on one, there is a balancing act. On one side, maybe you get what you want to not have to participate in something, but you're also inviting litigation, which is also not necessarily the most pleasant thing there could be. And the cases can go on for a long time. That's another misconception, that it is not like, say, a family court motion to adjust child support.
It's just,
it's an ongoing process that can take a year.
I mean, they're just complicated cases that need counsel. So if somebody wanted to retain you for their services, how would they contact you?
Well, the best way, I think, is to go to my website, which is tedbakerlaw.com. The information to get a hold of me is all on there. There's a contact form that you can fill out, and that goes to our email, which we see the second it comes in, and we'll be happy to reach out to you.
Ted, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to be here. As I said, this is my big time out. So I'll remember my appearance here has been my exit out of my house.
Your ability to wear the suit.
Right, exactly. I did still have the ability to tie the tie.
This is Justice for All. I'm Rebecca Berger, and we'll see you next week.